the gate that opens only to shadows. I never thought I'd be telling you this, but once you hear it, something inside you will wake up and it'll never go back to sleep. See, we've all heard of the fifth dimension, right? But no one talks about the fifth dark dimension. Why? Because it's not meant for light. It's not meant for those who chase comfort, who bathe in affirmation, or who run from their own darkness. It's a place only the dark chosen ones can enter. And today I'm going to tell you why. I've gone through realms you wouldn't believe. I've sat in silence under eclipsed skies for days. I've meditated in caves where time itself seemed to breathe. But nothing prepared me for the encounter with the gate to the fifth dark dimension. It didn't open with light. It didn't open with love. It opened with something else, something terrifyingly pure, shadow. Not evil, not hatred, but a raw, undiluted truth buried underneath every lie we've been told about ourselves. And the moment I realized that, I understood only the dark chosen ones could make it through.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
Why? Because the fifth dark dimension is not a place of escape. It's a realm of confrontation. There's no pretending there, no masks, no spiritual ego. If you still believe that mastering the light is the path to ascension, then you've only walked half the journey. True ascension begins when you descend into yourself, into your forgotten memories, into the pain you've suppressed for lifetimes, into the rage you've denied, into the versions of yourself you've tried to kill because society told you they were unspiritual. But here's the twist. Those versions are your ticket in. The fifth dark dimension is not a reward. It's a responsibility, and only those who've been chosen to bear the weight of their darkness without running can survive it. You might be wondering, am I one of them? That question alone reveals something. Because if you've ever felt like you didn't belong, if you've ever looked around at the world and thought, there's something deeper, something missing, something off, you might already be one of us. But being chosen doesn't mean being selected by a higher being. It means you chose. Long before you were born, you chose to carry what others couldn't. You chose to walk through fires that would break most. You chose to remember in a world hell-bent on forgetting. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you faced your own darkness willingly? When was the last time you sat in silence, not to find peace, but to hear your own screams echo back to you from forgotten corridors of your soul? That's what the dark chosen ones do. Not because they're masochists, but because they understand that the key to power is integration. The fifth dark dimension doesn't open to the pure. It opens to the whole. You see, in the old teachings, we were told to ascend by becoming lighter, raise our vibration. Think positive thoughts, eat clean, love everyone. And sure, there's wisdom in that. But tell me what happens to the shadow when you only focus on the light. Does it disappear? No, it grows stronger in your blind spot. It waits, and eventually it consumes you because you never acknowledged it. That's why the fifth dark dimension was created not as a punishment, but as a sanctuary. A realm where the shadow is not evil, where trauma is not a curse, where pain is not weakness, but where all of it is seen as sacred, as fuel, as truth. I remember the first time I stood at the edge of it. It wasn't a doorway. It was a mirror, a black mirror. And when I looked into it, I didn't see my face. I saw every version of me I had buried. The angry child, the manipulative teen, the jealous lover, the liar, the coward, the addict. And they were all staring back, not with hate but with expectation. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They were asking to be remembered. Because only when I could accept them without flinching did the mirror begin to ripple. And that's when I knew the gate was open. But the journey didn't end there. No, that's just the beginning. Because entering the fifth dark dimension isn't a one-time event. It's not a spiritual Disneyland. It's a commitment, a contract. It's saying, I will no longer run from myself. And that's the hardest promise you'll ever keep. Because to walk through those gates, you must carry every part of yourself not in shame, but in honor. Let me give you something practical. If you want to know where your shadow lives, look at what triggers you. Look at what you judge in others. That's not them, that's you in disguise. The fifth dark dimension doesn't care about your spiritual resume. It cares how honest you are. Can you sit with your jealousy and not justify it? Can you hold your rage without blaming the world? Can you feel your shame without collapsing into it? That's the test. That's the initiation. And most won't pass. Not because they're weak, but because they're still pretending. But you're not. You're still watching. You're still listening. That means something. Maybe you've already been chosen, or maybe you're about to choose yourself. Now, I want to ask you the question that cracked my soul open the first time I heard it. What part of you have you spent your whole life trying to hide? And what if that part is the reason you were born? What the light was too afraid to reveal? When I crossed into the fifth dark dimension, I expected chaos, screams, fire, shadows clawing at me, demanding payment for my sins. But what I found was silence. A silence so dense it felt alive. It didn't judge. It didn't soothe. It just was. And in that stillness, I realized something that shattered my entire understanding of light and darkness. The light had lied to me. It told me to chase it, to purify myself until I was worthy. But that purity became a prison. I was always cleansing, always affirming, always trying to be good. But good is often just a mask the ego wears to avoid its true face. And in that realm, stripped of light's illusions, I saw a truth, unfiltered. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't ugly. It was real. And the truth is this: the light was afraid of what it could not control. Have you ever noticed how spiritual circles often ignore pain? How they demonize anger, suppress grief, and shame desire? Why do you think that is? Because the light wants order. It wants predictability. It wants obedience. But the dark invites chaos. It whispers, come as you are. Come undone. Come broken, come bleeding. And that's why only the dark chosen ones can enter. Because we don't fear chaos, we are chaos. We don't suppress the wound, we become the wound. And in doing so, we become healers of a deeper kind. In the fifth dark dimension, I met others like me, wanderers, outcasts, warriors who had died 1,000 ego deaths and still kept walking. And none of them were perfect. Some were still carrying guilt from lifetimes ago. Others had made peace with their inner demons instead of trying to kill them. And do you know what that peace looked like? It looked like integration. Integration is not passive. It's violent. Not in a physical sense, but in how it unravels everything you thought was true. One of them, a woman with eyes like obsidian galaxies, said to me, "The light gave me answers, but the darkness gave me questions. And it's the questions that saved me, that hit me like a thunderclap. Because isn't that what we're all afraid of? Not the darkness itself, but the questions it forces us to ask. Questions like, why do I crave validation so desperately? Who am I when no one is watching? What have I sacrificed just to be accepted?" You see, the fifth dark dimension offers no answers. That's what makes it holy. It gives you space to remember what you've forgotten, not with words, but with experience. It brings you face to face with your soul's raw data. And let me be blunt, most people can't handle it. They think they want awakening, but what they really want is safety. An awakening, true awakening, is the death of safety. It's easy to quote Rumi when you're sipping matcha in the sun. It's another thing entirely to face the version of you that you swore you'd never become and say, "I love you. I need you. You are me." That's what the fifth dark dimension demands. Radical ownership, not of your divinity, but of your humanity. And that's what makes the dark chosen ones different. We don't worship light, we honor wholeness. Let me give you something practical. Try this tonight. Sit alone in the dark. No music, no candles, no crystals, just you and your breath. Now ask yourself, what emotion have I avoided the longest? What memory still makes my stomach tighten? And then, instead of running, lean in. Feel it fully. Cry if you need to. Scream if you must. That's not regression. That's initiation. Darkness is not the absence of light. It's the presence of the unseen. And in that unseen realm lives your forgotten power. Not the power to manifest cars or followers, but the power to sit in pain without needing it to end. The power to hold contradictions. The power to be real. That's what the fifth dark dimension cultivates. And that's why only the dark chosen ones survive its gravity. Because we've already died 1,000 times in this life alone. And every death made us more alive. There's something else I must tell you. And it's going to challenge everything you think you know about spirituality. The light needs the dark more than the dark needs the light. Let that sink in. Without darkness, light has no meaning. Without shadow, there is no depth. Without contrast, there is no beauty. But deeper than all of that, without darkness, there is no evolution. Light preserves. Darkness transforms. Light maintains. Darkness alchemizes. The fifth dark dimension is the forge of the soul. And only those willing to be melted, broken, reassembled again and again can endure its fire. This dimension doesn't give you wings. It gives you roots. It doesn't elevate you above others. It brings you so deep into yourself that you realize there are no others. That's the paradox. The deeper you go into your own shadow, the more compassion you gain for the shadows in others. That's why the dark chosen ones are not just warriors. We are bridges between light and dark, heaven and hell, spirit and flesh. So why are you here? Not just watching this video, but here, in this body, on this timeline, in this chaotic, collapsing world. Could it be that you are one of them? That you've always known you were different, but couldn't explain why? That your pain wasn't a punishment, but a preparation? Answer this honestly. What would happen if you stopped trying to be light and started trying to be true? The temple beneath the ashes. They don't tell you what's at the core of the fifth dark dimension. Not because it's a secret, but because most wouldn't believe it even if they saw it. And to be honest with you, I didn't believe it either until I stood there, and at the bottom of everything, beyond every fear, beneath every identity. And what I found wasn't a monster. It wasn't a demon. It wasn't even darkness. It was a temple. A living one, breathing, beating, ancient, mine. And it was buried under everything I thought I had destroyed. You see, the fifth dark dimension is built on layers of illusions, betrayals, regrets, karmic debris, ancestral pain. And deeper than all of that is the temple. But here's the paradox. The temple doesn't look like a temple. It looks like your worst day, your deepest shame, your most traumatic moment. The part of your story you swore you'd never speak of again. But when you face it, when you truly face it without trying to change it, fix it, explain it, you begin to see the architecture, the sacred design beneath the suffering. I stood in that space and realized something that I can barely put into words. Every wound is a doorway. Every betrayal was a blueprint. Every heartbreak, a hammer shaping the temple inside me. And the only reason I couldn't see it before was because I was too busy trying to escape it. You ever wonder why pain repeats? Why the same patterns show up again and again, even after years of healing work? It's because we never went deep enough. We stopped at forgiveness. We stopped at understanding. But the fifth dark dimension doesn't let you stop. It pulls you deeper until you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what am I being asked to become through this? That's the question that unlocks the temple. There I saw visions, not like dreams, but encoded memories from lifetimes I didn't even know I lived. I saw myself as the villain, as the tyrant, as the one who caused the pain. And I didn't turn away. I bowed. Because the temple isn't about being right. It's about being whole. And wholeness means acknowledging every role you've ever played in the cosmic drama of existence. Can you hold that level of truth? That you may have been the victim and the oppressor in different timelines. That your soul didn't come here to be comfortable, but to evolve through tension? That's what the dark chosen ones understand. That's why we don't flinch when the mirror shatters. Because we are the mirror, and we've already bled through every shard. Let me tell you something else I saw. Something most people wouldn't believe. There were no gods there, no angels, no ascended masters, only echoes, the echoes of choices, of energy set into motion by beings like us. The fifth dark dimension isn't governed by divine law. It's governed by truth. And truth doesn't care about your beliefs. It doesn't care about your spiritual rank. It only cares if you're willing to stand naked in its presence. And when you do, the temple begins to sing, not with words, not even with sound, but with vibration, a resonance that shakes every false identity loose. And in that resonance, I remembered who I was not as a personality, not as a role, but as a frequency, a signature, a beam of consciousness forged in the heart of contradiction. That remembering, that's the real initiation. And it shows you something wild. The darkness was never your enemy. It was your mirror, your mentor, your map. You just never learned how to read it. So let me teach you something practical again. Take out a journal. Write this sentence at the top. The part of myself I most reject is, and don't stop writing until your hand shakes. Keep going. Go past the surface, past the excuses, past the stories, into the raw, into the ugly, into the beautiful. And then sit with what you wrote. That's your temple. That's your gate. That's your power. The fifth dark dimension doesn't reward effort. It rewards surrender. Not to something outside of you, but to the you that lives beneath you. The one who never needed fixing. The one who was never broken. The one who was just waiting for you to stop pretending you were light and start remembering you were everything. You ever notice how the greatest transformations come after breakdowns? After loss? After complete collapse? That's not a coincidence. That's design. That's sacred architecture. And the fifth dark dimension is where that architecture is revealed. I'll tell you one last thing before we go deeper in the final part. There's a throne in that temple, but it's not for you. It's not something you sit on. It's something you kneel before. And when you do, when you finally drop every mask, every title, every spiritual flex, you realize that the throne is not a symbol of power. It's the birthplace of reverence. And the only ones who can find it are the ones who've died and come back not physically, but spiritually. The ones who faced their inner apocalypse and returned with wisdom carved into their soul. So I'll ask you again, what if the version of you you've spent your whole life hiding is actually the high priest of your inner temple? Let that question burn in your chest like a sacred fire. Because in the final part, I'll take you through the return. What happens after the temple? What happens when you come back to the world carrying the codes of the fifth dark dimension? The return of the Shadow King. Coming back from the fifth dark dimension is not like returning from a vacation, or even from an ayahuasca ceremony, or a deep meditation retreat. It's not something you come back from as you were. You don't walk out carrying souvenirs, you walk out carrying codes. You walk out carrying frequency. You walk out carrying the weight of truths that most people aren't ready to hear, let alone embody. And this is where the world begins to feel different. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You look around and suddenly you see through everything. The illusions, the smiles that hide pain, the systems built on fear, the spiritual masks people wear to avoid their own shadows. It's like waking up in a play where everyone is still acting except you've remembered it's a stage. And that's when the real challenge begins, because now you're not just a seeker. You're not just a wanderer. You are a carrier of the black flame. You are a shadow king or a shadow queen. Not because you rule over others, but because you've learned to rule over the chaos within. And the world doesn't know what to do with that kind of power. It doesn't know how to receive someone who doesn't flinch in the presence of pain, who doesn't run from conflict, who doesn't dilute truth to make it palatable. You become a mirror to everyone around you, and not everyone likes what they see. You'll notice something strange after you return. The people who used to resonate with you will start to fall away. Not because they're bad, not because they're less awakened, but because they're still dancing with the light, and you now move with the dark rhythm of wholeness. You'll begin to crave different conversations, ones that don't revolve around manifestation hacks or positive vibes, but around initiation, shadow alchemy, ancestral healing, and multidimensional responsibility. You'll feel the urge to speak, not to be heard, but to awaken. Your words will carry weight, not from volume, but from depth. And some people will call you intense. Some will call you dangerous. Others will call you dark, or worse, lost. But you'll know. You'll know that this path is not for appearances. It's not for accolades. It's for impact. Because the Shadow King does not seek the throne is within him. And every time he speaks truth, every time he holds space without needing to fix, every time he chooses depth over comfort, the throne expands. You'll also start to notice how the world responds to your frequency. Opportunities will shift. Some doors will close. Others will open, seemingly from nowhere. But here's the secret. It won't be about what you want anymore. It'll be about what needs to move through you. Your desires will change. You'll no longer crave validation. You'll crave alignment. You'll no longer seek to be impressive. You'll seek to be impactful. And that impact won't come from trying harder, it'll come from being more you. The raw, the real, the integrated. You'll walk into rooms and shift the energy without saying a word. Not because you're trying to, but because your presence now carries density. The kind of density that only comes from having walked through the fire and come out, not unscathed, but divine. That's the paradox. The dark chosen ones become divine not by rising above the human, but by descending fully into it. And let's talk about love, because this journey will shatter your old ideas of what love is. You'll no longer see love as comfort or safety or someone completing you. You'll see it as recognition, as two souls looking at each other and saying, I see your wounds. I see your shadows. I see your past. And not only do I not run, I honor it. That kind of love is rare. And it's the only kind that can survive in the frequency of the fifth dark dimension. Everything else is just spiritual romance. But this is sacred union, a collision of echoes across lifetimes, remembering. And you'll only attract it when you've made peace with being alone, when you no longer fear your own company, when your own shadow becomes your greatest lover. But here's the hardest part, the part no one tells you. When you return from the fifth dark dimension, you'll feel homesick. Not for a place, but for a frequency. You'll miss the silence, the clarity, the absence of pretense. You'll miss being surrounded by other souls who've died and been reborn over and over again. You'll miss the absence of ego. And you'll look around this world and see how few people have even begun the descent. It'll hurt. There will be days you'll want to go back, not because it was easier, but because it was realer. But that's not your path. Your path is to bring that frequency here, to ground it, to speak it, to walk it. You are the bridge now between the dimensions, between the seen and unseen, between the collective lie and the individual truth. You'll start to move differently in the world. You'll notice how your intuition sharpens, how your dreams become messages, how time bends around you, how synchronicity becomes a language, and you'll stop trying to explain yourself. Because you'll realize those who can hear you already do, and those who can't never will. You'll become more silent, more deliberate, more powerful in your stillness. Because the real kings and queens don't scream. They resonate. They don't demand. They embody. And you will have become the embodiment of the fifth dark dimension. Not as a title, not as a trend, but as a living temple. So now I ask you, not as a guru, not as Mr. Beast, not as a teacher, but as a mirror. What are you here to awaken? Not in others, but in yourself. What part of you have you kept buried beneath layers of light, of politeness, of spiritual etiquette? And what would happen if you let that part speak, scream, create, lead? You've heard the call. You've followed the descent. You've stood in the temple. You've remembered your throne. Now the last step is this: walk. Walk in your darkness. Walk in your truth. Walk as the embodiment of the shadow that loves so deeply it no longer needs to be seen. Because that's the final secret, the deepest paradox. The fifth dark dimension is not a destination. It's not a place you go to. It's the place you were always meant to become. And only the dark chosen ones ever do.